Welcome to The Vault at 201 North Broadway, podcast for innovators and problem solvers talking all things small business, entrepreneurship, and workforce development.
We are so excited for our guest today. He partners a lot with Carly and I in the world of workforce development. He's been instrumental in building connections between industry and students through career-based learning awareness and opportunities. So joining us today is a workforce leader here in Yellowstone County, Bo.
Thank you to the Small Business Development Center for sponsoring The Vault at 201 North Broadway. The Small Business Development Center provides free one-on-one counseling, business plan assistance, market research, financial projection assistance, and more to small businesses.
And before we dive into all the cool things you're doing with workforce development, schools, industry awareness, we thought it would be kind of fun to hear about who you are and your journey to Billings, because you're from South Dakota, originally a neighboring state. So do you want to tell us a little bit, give us a little background about who you are?
Yeah, so lot to unpack there. So
South Dakota.
I am from South Dakota. I grew up, lived there the first 25 years of my life. I'm kind of from all over in South Dakota. I started off, kind of we divide as South Dakotans it into two separate sections.
Montana.
So the Missouri River runs north-south pretty much and splits the state in half. And so the saying in South Dakota is, are you from East River or are you from West River? And that means, I'm from east of the Missouri River. And there's kind of two, and they're very different, like culturally. There's just a different vibe to the people from either side of the state. So I am mostly from East River. I was born East River near Mitchell. My parents were both teachers. My mom was a elementary school teacher. My dad was a high school business teacher, and they coached every sport. I grew up obviously in schools a lot, in the education world. My dad ended up getting out of education because South Dakota, I don't know if you know, is like 50th in teacher pay. It's the lowest. And my family was not affluent by any means. And so my dad was just kind of looking for a better life for our family. And so he ended up getting a nursing home administration. And so that kind of took us all over the state of South Dakota. I lived in Belfouche for a while, which is very near Montana, which is West River. And then I ended up in Beersford, which is the East River again. And then Elk Point was where I graduated high school. And it's southeast corner it's basically in the corner, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa meets. It's about 15 minutes from each of that point. And then I ended up going to the University of South Dakota for both undergrad and grad school. I wanted to be a lawyer, didn't, and ended up taking the LSAT, getting into law school, and had an advisor talk me out of it because she was basically like, why are you doing this? What do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know. It's just always kind of been the plan. I was told I should be a lawyer, and I was political science on that track all the way through college. Ended up taking like a gap year, I guess, and doing some internships in the legislature, did some politics stuff. Hated that. Just didn't like the politics side of things. Decided that I wanted to be on the bureaucratic, administration side of things. So I ended up going back, getting a master's degree. And then when I graduated,
and what was your master's degree in?
Public administration. So it was. I made a concerted choice because my gap year was kind of like, do I want to go to law school and pursue like a policy, politics type of career, or would I, rather do like a MPA? And so I decided in that year MPA was what I wanted to do. Went back, obtained that, and then at that time my sister had moved to Billings. She is a pharmacist at Billings Clinic. She was in Rapid City at the time, which is in West River, South Dakota.
I love this west-east thing. Yeah. I think it's very fun about South Dakota.
I kind of talk. I kind of forget that people, it's just the way that we talk about South Dakota, and like most people not from South Dakota are like, what are you talking about? But for people from there, it makes 100% sense. So my sister was in Rapid City, and she really wanted a certain type of pharmacy job, like in an emergency room setting. She looked at Billings, ended up getting a job at Billings Clinic, moved here with her husband, and he ended up getting a job, and I just visited, and I was graduating grad school. I was looking for a job. I had some experience in the legislature. I had some experience in workforce and economic development through some internships, and I just kind of sent it and was like, oh, I'm just going to start applying for jobs. Ended up I was looking at the state just because government, administration, I thought that's where my skill set and my experience, my limited experiences up to that point maybe fit. And I ended up getting a job with the Registered Apprenticeship Program. Just so happens that I was supposed to move to Helena, and they said during the interview, why are you interviewing? What are you trying to move to Montana? And I said, my sister lives in Billings. I'm just trying to get out here, whether it's Helena or Billings or whatever. I'm just trying to move here. And they said, well, actually, the territory that you'll be, overseeing or working in is basically Columbus East. So it's all of eastern Montana from Columbus over. Yeah. And so they said, hey, if we could find a spot in the job service office, would you be willing to work out of Billings? And I said, my sister's there, sure. And then that brought me to, I had it was a very important time in the apprenticeship program. As far as transition, we were transitioning from primarily like a registration agency and someone who worked primarily in the trades to, hey, this apprenticeship model works really well in European countries and it should be for all types of industries. So we went through a transformation in that program where it allowed me to develop a lot of like skills and experiences that I didn't know I was going to, be able to do until we started actually doing it. And that skill, I think that skill set, that some of the projects I got to work on and those types of experiences are what led me to this career outreach director role with Billings Public Schools.
Yeah. So could track back a little bit. I have like a couple questions that came to mind. One, did you travel to Montana a lot?
Yeah. So I probably had been here, I don't know, 6 or 7 times before I moved here. My sister had lived here maybe 2 years. I spent weeks, like I spent a week out here one summer. I spent 2 weeks with her in between internships where I was just, I didn't have any work to do. I didn't have anything else to do. So I just drove to Montana and stayed with her and my brother-in-law. And so I'd spent quite a bit of time in Billings for someone who was just visiting. And that's where, I had a friend who lived in Bozeman. I got to see a lot of, this side of the state. And it was enough like home that I felt like, okay, I can make this transition. It wasn't a huge culture shock, but it has a lot of things that South Dakota doesn't in sense of like outdoor activities. It's it's nothing wrong with the cornfield farm communities that I grew up in, but an hour away from
the Corn Palace.
Yeah.
Let's not discredit that.
Which my grandma lives in Mitchell, so I know all about the Corn Palace. But it really was a good fit as far as like what I was looking for, as well as like it had enough familiarity to home that it was an easy transition.
Yeah, and then with your job as with the apprenticeship piece, you'd said Eastern Montana. So I'm guessing you did a lot of travel and relationship building with that role. How was that?
So I was so my territory, like it was very wide. It was all the way the High Line, all the way over to, Bainville, Sydney area, Medicine Lake, I bet Scobie, all of those communities. I spent a lot of time in hotels in Miles City, in Glendive, and Sydney, and Glasgow, and, everywhere in between. So that was, the cool part is that for a lot of people that would move here, that's not the part of the state that is like really attractive on its face. But I got to travel there. I got to see Makoshika. I got to see, it's Badlandsy, just like, South Dakota has Badlands National Park. So it was a beautiful part of the state that I don't know if I would have explored as much if I wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned to a statewide role with that program, where I got to see even more of the western side of the state. So honestly, in my couple, 3-4 years with that program, I got to see almost every corner of Montana. Mm-hmm. And so it was just that part of the job was a great benefit to me just personally, as being able to see this state.
And then all those connections, I'm sure you've built statewide.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's funny. I was in Glendive one day and I was talking to a coworker who worked in the Flathead, and I realized I was closer to my friend who I was talking to in Minneapolis distance-wise than I was to my coworker in Kalispell. So it's also like this state is just so diverse, and like it's so big that there's so many different pockets of like culture and people and how they look at things and lifestyle and all of that it was just it was a really cool experience to see all of that.
I think you need to print out a map of Montana and just like highlight every road you've been on. You probably cover almost the entire thing.
I think the south of Missoula-ish area, like in Dillon, like that area, I think those are the two areas I have spent the least amount of time, but everywhere else I've probably been on a highway traveling from. I had a job with the tribal colleges, which are not like located really around populated areas. So you're taking back, to get from Chief Dullknife to, Wolf Point, that's you're going to take some interesting, some interesting highways along that way.
Maybe no service. Yeah.
So you did that job for a few years. What led you to the job you currently have?
So I started working like I said, in a statewide role, and we were making a transition with the program, as I kind of mentioned, with how, like, industries and what we were looking at. We were basically trying to develop new apprenticeship models that hadn't been done before or hadn't been done before in Montana. And so that led into work with high schools. And so in that role, I worked with Scott Anderson, Billings Career Center principal, on a project. I ended up working with Superintendent Upham when he was the assistant superintendent in Helena on a construction apprenticeship model that they were trying to set up in Helena. And so from the moment I met Greg, I still remember it. I was at the Office of Public Instruction in Helena. We were meeting about this program that we were trying to set up. And I could just tell, like, he was different than most of the educators that I'd met. Scott Anderson, I would say, falls into this category too, where they were thinking about ways to, better serve students with things like apprenticeship in a way that I think K-12 education has kind of been behind the times on. They just had, like, it was a fresh vision. I was close enough to, like, being in that chair of, like, a high school student and not knowing what I wanted to do necessarily.
Yeah.
And friends that had trouble finding what they wanted to do, where I saw the relevance and, like, what they were kind of their vision for it. And so from that project, I was like, I need to try to work with Greg. I don't know what it is, but I want to try to work for or work with this guy because he gets it. So there was a time where I was applying for jobs in Helena, at Helena College, and in certain roles that would have been, I would have gotten to work with him. And so he ends up, being in the superintendent, the finalists for superintendent in Billings. There was this role that I currently held that someone else was in that I knew was, I talked to him and he was closer to retire. He was going to retire in a few years. So I was like, okay, there's a way where Greg becomes a superintendent, this job becomes open, and I have a shot at it. And so it ended up, Greg was not the first choice for superintendent. They were trying to hire someone from, I think, somewhere on the East Coast. They offered him the job. He ended up not taking it. And then he was their second choice, and he ended up taking the job. And so, like, phase one of the plan was done. It's like, Greg is in Billings. He's, the superintendent of schools. The second piece was that Lou Anderson, who had my position before this, he decided to retire. And so so Greg's first year, Lou was in this position, and then it came open that summer. And so
you were kind of watching.
Oh, I was
Greg. Okay, I love this, like, stalking thing that I
know you hadn't really planned out. You're like, okay, I had a conversation with this guy and he's going to retire soon. So if Greg gets in there, then this piece falls in. And
so I was
because of his vision, right?
Yeah.
Like, you were really with Scott and with Greg. And then you knowing some of the things you knew. It's kind of like this, like, power trio.
Yeah. And so I was looking, and I looked at other jobs too. Like, even Kirk Lacey was another person that worked. He was a mentor of mine. I worked with him with the apprenticeship program. He was the interim president of Helena College at the time. He knew Greg. He was also, like, very much on board with this. So that's where, like, a different way my life kind of unfolds would be, I moved to Helena, and this job working for Kirk, working with Greg, it ended up not working out, that way, but that was a possibility for me. And so, but yes, I was looking like, okay, Greg's here, this job is open, and now I'm going to apply for it. So I went in, maybe a little bit, in a way that I don't think a lot of people would have. I know I've maybe seem extroverted because I have to be a people person in my job, but I'm a little bit introverted, or I don't know, conservative, or, like, not as confident in, like, being, super. I don't want to be super over the top, or, like, this is about me or my brand or my career. And so I actually did not talk to Greg before, even though I had worked with him. I know I was a good candidate for the job. I didn't talk to him or anyone around him before I applied for the job, which I think a lot of people would have probably reached out to Greg and been like, hey, I'm going to apply for this job. What can you? I was like, okay, if I know I really like working with him, I think he likes working with me. If I'm the best person for this job, I'll get the job. And I went in for the first time in my life, I think, in an interview where I felt like, okay, I have a vision for what I want to do here. Like I have, like part of it is, it's Greg's vision that I knew he wanted. It was something that I had co-opted as like, okay, I think that's actually the right thing to be doing. And so I went into that job interview and I felt really good about it. And I ended up getting the job offer. And
can you share with us the vision? A little bit of what you had and what his was, just to give, our listeners a little bit of a glance into what that was.
So a lot of it is, and I don't want to, this can turn into an anti-college, message really quickly, and it's really not. And so I think the vision is that K-12 education for a long time has really pushed, it's built to send kids to college. It's what it was designed to do, which is a good thing. We need people to go to college. The way our economy has shifted and our world has shifted and all the opportunity that's out there, our K-12 education system has not changed that system to adapt to what the world is actually asking of, our future workforce and opportunities and those types of things. So the vision really was that we were going to keep doing the really good things that we were doing for students that want to go to college, and any kid or any student who that's their goal, we want to help them prepare so that they can make that step if they want to. The other half is that there's all this opportunity out here, and there's all these students that aren't being served by the system, because we know statistics-wise, you've probably heard Greg and I talk you've probably heard us 100 times talk about what the statistics are in Billings Public Schools. Roughly 50% pursue 2 or 4 year degrees. Around 150 get a 2 or 4 year degree when we look in after 4 years. And then if we stretch that out to 6 years, another 150. So out of every graduating class, 25% of it gets a 2 year or 4 year degree. That means that 900 kids, because we graduate 1,200 kids, 900 kids are somewhere more than a high school diploma, less than a 2 year degree. And so the question was like, what are we doing for those students? How are we providing equal opportunities for that? So I came in with being in an apprenticeship role. That really is where you're combining on-the-job training and some school, usually not a 4 year degree, something less than that, something maybe even outside of the college system in order to get someone to the skill level they need to. Yeah. So really that's where the vision was, okay, how do we continue to do well for our college students and also provide all these opportunities for, students? And I think the role was, okay, I have to have relationships with businesses, with people like Billings Works, people, those are the conversations I need to be in, because if the students are the supply side, the demand is out in business and industry, right? They're the ones with the jobs and the opportunities. And so that was kind of the vision. And then I will say it was fortuitous that this was like how it happened. Everyone is struggling to find workforce right now. And so in the past, the colleges have come in and they've recruited our students hard. They're in our schools every week. The military have come into our schools and they recruit our students hard because they need soldiers. Private business has traditionally not come into, and industries have not come in and recruited our students. And now, because there's such a workforce shortage, those businesses are starting to warm up to the idea of, number one, I need to talk to students and tell them about our opportunities. So there's a career awareness and exploration there. But also, I should be looking at, how do I grow this person into the future employee that I need, or how do I start a pipeline, because businesses are so desperate to find talent that it ended up working out that, we weren't knocking on a lot of doors. A lot of people are approaching us saying, hey, how do I get involved with the schools? But that's kind of overall the vision that Greg laid out and that I bought into, and that we've been trying to, work through over the past, this is my 4th school year now. So that's,
And you've done an excellent job at it. You guys are incredible, the work you do at SD2.
And congratulations. Now back to Bo gets the job and gets to work with Greg, right? Which is exciting. Congrats. And then, so 4 years has lapsed. And what are some of those things that you guys have worked on in those 4 years since you're, getting hired on, Greg's there? Then what?
So another important factor in this is that we passed, as a community, we passed a mill levy. And in that mill levy, they tagged 4 positions that were called career coaches. And so that was basically the spring/summer leading up to when I got the job. And so those positions had never existed before. We ended up passing the mill levy. We have these 4 positions. There were, I believe, 111 applicants for those 4 jobs. So a lot of people, I mean, who anymore hears that they have 111 applicants for any job? And so there are a lot of people who really wanted to work with students on careers. And so that ended up timing. So I started August 12th, and those 4 career coaches came on board August 13th. And so we're all new to the school district. I'm new in my job. It was a lone wolf job. They're new in a job that's never existed before. And so Greg kind of brings us into a room and is like, hey, you're in your role. You've got an idea of what you want to do. I think this is my vision for what you do. You guys, it's going to be build the plane as you're flying it. This is the general idea of what you guys are going to be doing, or the types of things you should be doing. Try things. You have my full support on what you think you need to be doing, and we'll touch base occasionally to make sure we're on the right track. But he just kind of gave us hey, I'm empowering you guys to figure this out. And so that's where it started. We tried a lot of things. We failed at a lot of things. We had people questioning well, what are the career coaches doing, and what is the return on this investment? And it's kind of just been a slow burn on they're assimilated into their school cultures now, that people know they're there and how to utilize them. We found what works and what doesn't. And so the buildup has been, they had roughly, I think, 300 interactions with students on one-on-one basis, where they're talking about classes, careers, job shadows, anything related to a career or exploring a career or college in that first year. And the first year was the COVID year. So of course we got that curveball thrown at us at the end of our first year, but we're going to be up to over 1,000 of those one-on-one meetings this year. And then we've built some great programs that end up getting students out into either experiencing and exploring careers. We've done some industry days and things like that. We do lunch and learns. We do a lot to try to let students explore or play in the sandbox, as we say, in careers. And then for those students that end up knowing what they want to do or have a good idea, we're starting to develop programming and that's where our business partners have been huge, where students are actually getting out to those jobs and into those careers, getting their foot in the door while they're still in high school. So the way I kind of equate it is recently we've done more dual credit, where students can basically start high school or college while they're still in high school and get credit. We still do that. What we're just doing is we're bringing a career aspect to this. So those students who are trying to explore that career field rather than that college setting, they have kind of an equal opportunity to start that journey while they're still in high school.
So cool.
Yeah, Bo, for any businesses listening to this right now that would want to, get connected with you, what's the best way to get involved with some of these programs you have going on?
So the best way is probably reaching out to me directly right now. We do have, we've done a big part of what we've done the last couple of years is we've been trying to get more into the marketing game. And I know people are going to be like, well, why is public education spending money on marketing? Where's the money coming from? We have a grant that we've written into it to try to do that, because we realize that the kitchen table is one of the best classrooms that students have. And so until we get more into that kitchen table conversation about what's available and get families just in the know about how to navigate and play this career game, we know that we will have a ceiling on kind of what we can do. And so we have videos that we've developed that are marketing opportunities within Billings Public Schools and some of the opportunities that students have gotten that are coming out. And we will have a website. And so on that website, which should be launching within the next couple months, there will be an opportunity for businesses to raise their hand and say, you fill out a form, it comes directly to me and my team and say, hey, I'm looking to get involved with the school district. And honestly, for those businesses, it can be as little as you come in once to do a lunch and learn once a year, or you attend our senior career fair, or you can be like some businesses and you will jump at every single middle school, high school, anything that we throw at them. There's some businesses that are just game to try it. And so for someone who is worried about maybe when am I going to have time for this? We have some people who we see once a year or whenever they need us. And then we have some people who are constantly engaged in the process because they've, been able to do that. And so there's kind of something in this maybe for everyone. And your level of engagement is based on what you can accommodate. We don't have a minimum expectation of businesses.
What will that website be so listeners can go, oh, hey, I do want to keep an eye out for that and raise my hand?
I believe it's bpsfutureready.org is the and so Future Ready is the big initiative that we've kind of been pushing marketing wise, and that goes back to that conversation I was talking about. Like, we're removing the dichotomy and the stigma that exists between are you going to college, are you going to work? We really don't care where a student ends up. We want to hear about
you care.
Yeah, we care. We care about where they end up. We want to know what their goals are, where they want to get, and then we try to develop like an individualized path that then gets them there.
What's best for them?
Yeah, that involves college, then we will 100% full-throatedly advocate that. If there's multiple options for that, we will present those options to them, because there are careers where it's like, you can do an apprenticeship, become an electrician. You can go to a 2-year school and then come out and finish an apprenticeship, or you can go to a union program and spend time. There's 3 different ways to get to the same spot. And so for like a student like that, we don't care which path you go. We just need you aware of those 3 options. And for students and families, if you're not connected to that career somehow or know someone, it can be really hard to get to that. And so part of what we're doing is trying to help students and families to say, hey, you don't need that connection and know someone at Mountain Electric. We have those relationships. We'll help facilitate that for that student. That's kind of I guess the overall goal is we don't care how they want to get there or where they end up. We're trying to work with the family to say, hey, here's the doors that you need to open, and this kind of how you play the game.
And you guys have had some success already, being new, like not even 5 years yet. You've had some of those successes already. Can you talk a little bit about some of those student industry successes that you had?
So the cool thing is that we've got students all across the board as far as like where they've ended up post-secondary wise. And so like one example from our Build Montana program, we have a student she's a female student. She did the Build Montana program. She got connected to a construction company that was that was a part of that program. Interviewed, got a job, and has been working there ever since she graduated. And she's, I believe, making over $23 an hour.
Yeah.
She has mostly been doing on-the-job training and maybe some industry-recognized certifications outside the college system. But she's on a great path to, a construction career. There's going to be opportunities and doors that open for her to a lot of different like career lattices, ways that her career can go. But that's one that, prime example of someone who isn't in the college system that is, $25 an hour is a great job.
Yeah.
Another student who is kind of in between, again, from the Build Montana program, but he is in a diesel mechanic apprenticeship kind of program with CAT. And so he works on the job training as a diesel mechanic. They have a program called Think It Big, where they help facilitate a 2-year associate degree in diesel mechanics. They have a partnership with I believe a college in Portland, where basically he works for 80-90% of the year at CAT, and then 10 to 20% he spends at the college doing the education kind of centered around. So it's around his work schedule. And so he will end up eventually with a 2-year associate degree, partially paid for by CAT. And so that's a prime example of, here's a student who's kind of doing a blended model where he's pursuing some post-secondary. And then we had a student last year who worked with NAI Properties and also Enzo. And so Tyler Sampson is an NAI real estate agent. He also owns Enzo. And so this particular student was kind of working. So he got credit to go out and work with Tyler during the day, do commercial real estate stuff, opening up properties for clients and doing walkthroughs and learning that. He ended up taking his commercial real estate exam right after he graduated. And I believe he's passed now. And so he has his real estate exam. He was working at Enzo for like and he was doing a lot of the management stuff for Tyler at night. So that's after school, getting that background. And then he ended up he's now at MSUB pursuing a marketing degree, but he has all of this marketing experience. He knows real estate now. He has a real estate license. He knows how the restaurant industry works. He's done management. He's done scheduling. He's done stuff that he knows how to run back of house, front of house, all everything in between. This is an experience that a high school senior got.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did I get that experience?
Which I think it's
right?
It used to be backwards though. Like, he would say, I'm interested in marketing. I'm going to go do marketing. And then those experiences come later. And then that's kind of how I figured out what I wanted to do is like, oh, I'm on the back. I'm like, I know what I like to study, but I don't really know how that applies to the real world, where he has like concrete examples of like, oh, this is why I would go get a marketing. And he's got context behind what he's learning at MSUB. And so that's like a prime example of like, this is not an anti-college message. That student has a ton of experience, skills, networking connections that he's going to take in his career.
And those classes are going to make way more sense. I swear, your senior year of college, like everything just like clicks so much differently after you've done an internship.
Exactly. And so that's where like those are prime examples of students who have what we call success stories. And, it's all across the spectrum. And the last thing I'll say about those, because we have other ones too, is that the students, we were worried when we started doing this because we're like, these are 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. They're barely adults or not quite to full maturity and all those types of things. We were worried, what is going to happen when we send these students out there? Are they going to just fall on their face? Are they not ready for the challenge? Are they not going to step up? And we've largely avoided most of that. I mean, obviously it happens here and there, but most students have really succeeded, excelled, been professional, liked what they did. Businesses have nothing but good things to say about them. And our theory is it's because students are getting to choose what they want to do and life is not choosing them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of students when they leave us that their networking or the opportunities that they have are limited to what mom and dad and their family and people can kind of get them. And so there's a lot of students that are in that like not going to college, demographic that their life is choosing them in a little bit. It's what your family can provide to you as opportunities. And some people end up obviously making it, having great lives, great careers. But a lot of people feel like, well, this isn't what I love to do. This is not what I'm passionate about. I didn't get to really choose this. This is just was what available to me. And there can be a lot of like dissatisfaction and resentment that comes from that. And so our theory is that because students are getting to raise their hand and say like, oh, this is what I'm interested in, help me get there, that they're succeeding a lot more and much more like invested in it just because they're getting to choose rather than feeling like, oh, this is just all I had available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love what you're saying about that because you're allowing them out to visit different careers. But along that lines, there's also the Career Center here in Billings. And can you tell everybody about what that is and how that helps too?
Yeah. So the community, and it's like I say this not ironically, in its infinite wisdom, decided that the Career Center was something that they wanted to build back in the 70s. And so they said, hey, we want a standalone Career Center that and basically the concept is we can't build 3 automotive shops. We can't build 3 welding shops. We can't build, we can't have healthcare, an operating room at every single school. It'll be too expensive. So we need one central location that we can send students, all students from Billings Public Schools, high schools, so that we can have one of those and provide that program. And so that it's been through many different iterations on what the Career Center was. It used to be called the VOTEC, and it was largely trade related. And it was, it had a reputation where it's like, oh, if you're not cut out for college, you go to the Career Center. In its, I guess, later iterations, it's been careers all across the board. There are still, our trade programs are very strong there, but there's, a lot of college bound. We have engineering program, graphic arts, we have health sciences. We have a lot of different interior design. We have a lot of different programming that are offered to our students, and it was a choice that our community made. So people ask why do we only have 6 periods a day when most schools have 7? So the way the funding works is that the 6, in order to offer a 7th period, we would have to take all the money that we put towards the Career Center and put it to offer a 7th period. So that's something that our school is a little bit different, unique, but mm-hmm. Other communities ask us, how did you guys do this? You guys chose to run a 7-period day. We chose to build a standalone Career Center and offer these different career opportunities. So our students have access to a lot more ways, sandboxes to explore careers within our school district because of what our community had vision for a long time ago. And then, like I said, it's morphed and adapted so that there's programming for both college bound or, students that are going to maybe directly enter the workforce. And it's been a huge benefit to our community because it allows students to test things out before we bring them to you. We don't have programming for every occupation, obviously, or pathways for every occupation, but we have a lot of them where they get to test it out, and we actually get to see them in action about like, okay, is this kid, is this student cut out for this? Do they like this? Are they committed? What's their, before we go set up that partnership, let's make sure that we like working on, automotive. We don't just think we like working on vehicles. So it's a huge piece to our success. It's been something that's been, I think, a huge benefit to this community a long time. And it's just it's always been successful, but the work that we're allowed to do with careers and future ready and all that, I think is trying to make that, add a little bit of layer and value to the student experience within Billings Public Schools where, and it's not, the last thing I'll say is it's not on the teacher to build those partnerships anymore, which it's tough. You think about it. I have a 6-period day. I have students basically from 8 to 3, every day. When is there time for me to go out and build relationships with businesses? When is there time? It's a lot of teachers do it and they're really good at it. And they still have partners that they've worked with. So I don't want to say like, oh, this is, something that Bo and the career coaches do. It honestly helps. The way I look at it is my job is to try to take some of that off their plate. And so that they're not responsible for it just because they don't have enough time in the day to do it. It's literally it's not built in for them to be able to go out and make those relationships. And so I try to encourage them to tap what I do and what the career coaches do to try to make it so that we make this big puzzle on helping kids find out what they want to do, make it fit kind of.
Yeah. And I think something that's also cool with the Career Center is all of your high schools go, right? So they all get to meet other kids from different schools that maybe they wouldn't meet.
Widening their network.
Yeah, so
otherwise.
All 3 high schools go to the Career Center. We actually have students, I don't know if people know this, if you're a Billings Catholic student and you live within the Billings School District, you can go to the Career Center. We have students that do that. We have homeschool students. We've had kids that come in from Laurel that pay tuition to go to the Career Center. And so it's not just our students. If we obviously our students get priority. So if programs are filled, then we can't accommodate that. But we actually have a lot of people in our community that access the Career Center, and they'll just go for, homeschool kid is interested in automotive. They get to go, 2 hours a day to the Career Center. They're a part of our future workforce too. So it's a benefit that I think a lot of people take advantage of, but more people should probably know about.
Yeah, it's such a cool facility. Carly and I were just out there a couple of weeks ago. So cool. Just all the different things that are offered in that space. So
I will say the funny thing is like it's really easy to get caught up in like our own little Billings world, and the Career Center is old. We've got deferred maintenance there. The building
kind of looks funny from the outside.
Yeah, it's very 70s, right? And
the locker colors and everything. You just step into the 70s.
And they're looking. The school board and the community is looking at, okay, what does the future of the Career Center look like? Do we renovate this building? Do we find another building? Do we build? They're going through all of that, and I'm just here to provide information to them about that. I don't feel one way or another about it, but I do think it's important to remember for our community that despite it being an old, outdated building and not the most aesthetically pleasing and all those types of things, that there are communities in Montana and around the region that look at that as like, why, like, look at Billings. I can't believe that they have that. That's such a great benefit to our students. And it's just easy to kind of lose sight of that because we're so used to it that, like, of course, this is just
like
the way.
We've always had it.
Yeah, we've always had it. But it's important to kind of just bring back, like, we're very lucky that that this community decided to do that back in the 70s.
So I grew up in Helena, and at my high school, we had certain things, like construction class, and, there was, mechanic class and interior design, but nowhere near the services that the Career Center shows, and then the different types of careers that you could potentially do. Like the child care program out there is phenomenal, and it's also something that we're really needing in our communities right now. So I just think it's amazing, and I wish I had something like that so I could have tested a few different things as I was going through high school. So then I kind of knew, and I love where my trajectory went. I am definitely on the path that I was supposed to be on, but it would have been really cool to be able to test out some other things and be a part of some of the other programs where I could have went and job shadowed and really seen different things. So, at 23 years old, I wasn't going, what do I want to be when I grow up? I could be like, I tried a few different careers in high school and, got some different internships and opportunities. And I definitely have a good idea of, where I maybe want to go. I think it's definitely great what you're doing and the services that, you guys are definitely trying to provide.
If I had $1 for every time someone said, I wish I had this in high school when they got to see some of this stuff, we would have enough to build a new career center. And then also the recognition of just because I feel the same way, just because I made it to I didn't graduate high school and was like, I'm going to be a career outreach director. Was not on my radar, shockingly.
Neither was economic development.
Yeah. You just kind of fall into it.
And so just because we made it to where we feel like we're successful and we're happy, I was like, there's a million things that could have happened that could have tripped me up. Absolutely. Or I was very lucky that my parents were supportive for me to, try these different things. And that's where some of the motivation comes from my end is I figured it out, but not every student has the same support or the same, things can trick them up and send their life on a completely different trajectory. And so a lot of this work, the reason it's rewarding and worth doing is because, hey, we're trying to make it easier for students so that they know what's available. When life throws them a curveball, they know what their options are. And then they just get to choose what they want to do rather than there's some value in the struggle and grit, but there also is the realization that we probably have a lot of kids and students that slip through the cracks because they get tripped up and then they don't have the information about where's my next step, what is available to me. So that's where I think a lot of people buy into this is just because I made it doesn't mean that it can't be easier for other students to figure out that journey.
And you guys have made such huge impacts, and I know in a lot of those students' lives with the work that you're doing, knowing that a lot of these businesses are taking on students that are in high school during the school day. What are some tips that you have for businesses taking on a high school student to come into their workplace? Because it is different than maybe taking on a 20-something or a college intern, but what are some of those things that you would?
So I would say the first thing is that you have to recognize that you are dealing with a younger person. Mm-hmm. They're still 16, 17, 18 years old. A breakup with a significant other can be a big time event in their life, and it doesn't mean that they're just going to need a different. You have to have a different level of support for them. I think there's a misconception that we should be kind of fighting against with the younger generation on they don't want to work or they have these different expectations of us and what they want out of work. I think about it in a different way where there are things that you can do as an employer to better serve the younger population. I always say they will work for you, but they want to know what's in it for them. And that sounds negative, but I don't think that's bad. In the past, you could just say, hey, if you work hard and you show up every day, at some point we'll figure, we'll promote you or, and that there wasn't a clear path there. I think a lot of people have seen that that's not always a guarantee anymore with their own careers. And so the younger generation is asking us, okay, what do I need to do to grow here? And it doesn't mean that they expect to become the supervisor after a year, but they want to know what the pathway looks like to grow their career. And so you have to think about this generation a little bit differently in the sense that they will work for you, but you need to properly motivate them. And one of the ways that you can do that is just telling them, hey, I'm laying this out for you. This is how all the different opportunities that you would have. They are willing to be the person that sits on a shovel for 8 hours in the sun when it's 100 degrees and it's not very fun, because they know, okay, I'm doing this because I have an end destination in mind. When it's like that and they don't know what their next step is, it's really easy for them to say, this isn't for me. There's something in air conditioning that's a little bit more comfortable that I can make as much money. But it's true that kid will stay on that job site and work hard for you if they kind of know. So I think just knowing that they're younger, trying to tap into some of the way that they think and view the world and what they want out of work as employers, I think you will find that these students will be a lot more loyal to you than you maybe think. If you just, you treat them like adults, you respect them, and you give them clear expectations and how they can get to the next step, I think they'll work for you.
Yeah, not to reiterate what you just said, Bo, but I think it's super powerful to go back and mention that there is a lot of that talk now that like younger generation doesn't want to work, and they're all like lazy and they just want to be like YouTubers, and which is still a job, but I think, like you said, the important thing is they want to work differently. It's not the same as it's always been, and these younger generations have just been more like vocal about it, I guess. And so as employers, stop saying like they don't want to work. They just want to work differently. Like they want to do the job, but you need to listen to them. And like you said, it needs to be very cut and dry, like what they're working towards, so that they have that motivation and they know like the value they're bringing, but also like that they have a sense of purpose too. So.
And I think that it's I don't want to say like, hey, you have to completely, for employers, like, hey, you don't have to completely like break down every, thing you believe about work and those types of things either. Like obviously in a construction job, when you're an entry level employee, you can't work from home. Like it's not, there's just not an option. There's really not an option for that. So we're not saying that, but we are saying like, hey, some of these things that the ways we've thought about work and how people are working, really think about what are the tight things that I really need out of this, this worker, and, and then what are the loose things that like, hey, if you do have a job that can be done, somewhat remotely or whatever, thinking about those types of things. Like I said, I think that you'll be surprised at how hard these people, they don't work any less hard than previous generations. They've grown up in a different world and have different expectations. And rather than rail against the reality of that, I think we just have to figure out how to best, work with them.
Where to meet them.
Yeah, where to meet them. And right now, the employers that are doing that work are so much further ahead of the curves than the ones that are sitting around complaining about it. Yes. I know that's very like direct, but I'm telling you, there are businesses and that are getting ahead of this game and understand that and have broken down some of those like long held beliefs that they have about the way that they're working. And they're the ones that are starting to see the return on investment of like, oh, we have employees that, not only do they take the job, they stick around and they're loyal to us, and they'll work for us for a long time. I think just being on that, you want to be on the front end of that rather than, on the tail end.
Yeah. And in today's workforce, everyone's looking for jobs. So it's so easy for someone to just be like, I'm going somewhere else. If this isn't working, bye. Like,
it's rather than, I think it's really, and it gets really hard because you're running a business. It's, you're trying to keep the lights on.
Yes.
You're trying to support your workforce. Like you don't want to lay off people. These are, people have livelihoods and families and things, obligations that so I totally get it from a business listening to this and saying, hey, you don't know how hard it is. I recognize that, but I think that, making some of these changes and trying to adapt and be on the front end of some of it rather than, scratching your head and saying, I don't know what the problem is. It's like sometimes you just have to accept the reality of what's being presented is that there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's good paying jobs, all over the place. And so it's kind of a job seekers market right now. There's employers who are definitely making good headway on their workforce issue because they've stopped talking about that and really started to say, okay, well, how can I adjust what I do in order to attract more talent?
So on that note, I love that you're starting to talk a little bit about partnerships and things that certain industries are doing, which makes me, we work a lot with you through Billings Works, and you work with us, we work with you with Billings Works and some of those industry connections, which before we get into that, at our next section of this podcast, let's take a moment for a message from one of our sponsors.
Thank you to Big Sky Economic Development for supporting the Vault at 201 North Broadway. Big Sky Economic Development provides leadership and resources for business creation, expansion, retention, new business recruitment, and community development.
Okay, Bo, earlier you mentioned Build Montana, which seems like it would be one of those great partnership pieces, industry, being more proactive. Can you tell us a little bit about Build Montana and some of those other examples that you were getting into a little bit earlier in our conversation with those industries that are, taking the leap, just being proactive?
Yeah, so that is an industry that they're an example of being ahead of the game. So couple years ago, the Montana Contractors Association, they primarily represent, people who build roads, bridges, infrastructure, commercial buildings, so commercial construction companies. They're a statewide organization that has membership that, you belong to. So they, similar to like how Chambers and Big Sky, you have people who give money to you to support, their membership with your organization. So they're a large organization across the state. They're based in Helena, but they represent that industry. The Montana Equipment Dealers, same thing, represent equipment dealers in Montana. They have been hearing for years, and it's really accelerated the last couple. We can't find workforce. We just, we cannot find workers. We have jobs that are, that we can't bid on or we can't take not because we can't do it. It's because we don't have the workforce. So they announced Build Montana, and they say, this is a new workforce development initiative that we're doing statewide. And so the executive director, I don't think he would, David Smith, he said he made that announcement, and then he looked at Barry Hauser, his marketing guy that works for MCA, and he's like, okay, now what? What do we do now? So he said that we're going to focus on workforce. We have an idea behind it. It's called Build Montana. What does that look like? I hear about it. I'm just starting the job here at Billings. I've worked in the construction industry a lot in the apprenticeship world. That's where we work a lot with the trades. So I'm not a tradesperson. I can't do anything without help. Like I have to call an electrician for everything.
Which is safe.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to do it myself. That's
one of those things you don't play with.
Yeah. Yes. But I know that world because of my experience. So I said, okay, I think this is one of the industries that's primed to do something. They're desperate for workers. They're announcing that they're doing a workforce development thing. I'm in this position that, we can maybe do something. Like I have the power to try to, set something up. So I call them and say, hey, we're interested in being one of the first. We want to be a school district that gets involved in this. And from there, we have some partners who are extraordinary. John Hurd at RDO Equipment, Adam Gilbertson at RDO Equipment, Hal Fugelvon, Dave Resch at Knife River. They're all in this, this group that are the people that I'm thinking of, like, hey, these are our people to pilot it with. And so we kind of have a conversation about, okay, what does Build Montana look like? Well, we want it to be exploratory. We want students to see different aspects of being in an equipment dealership and being in a commercial construction, building bridges, roads that we don't think that they have any idea about unless their family is involved with it. So it's very much, let's set this up experientially. And so we advertise it to students. We say, hey, here's this new program we're doing, and it's during the 2020-2021 school year. So it's like you're in the second school year that's been affected by COVID. There's all these restrictions in place. There's a million reasons not to do something like this. As far as like, we just don't have the capacity. It's going to be complicated. We just kind of forged through it. And my career coaches will say I think they would admit that during that process we were setting this up, that they were like, what the heck are we, like, why are we doing this? Yeah. Why are we doing this? Why is Bo so like, why is he making us do this?
Why are we pushing through this?
Because I was like, we got to make this happen. We got to make this happen. And it was complicated, and it was especially on their end because it was COVID, mass, all the whole 9 yards. How do we do this safely? And so we end up getting 6 kids interested, and we just kind of we start doing stuff. So they're at RDO, they're going out on these different construction experiences. They're getting to see the dealership. They're getting some idea about how equipment works. Get to the graduation point. 2 of those students have job offers from Knife River. And so on the Knife River side, Hal Fugelvon said this. He said, if those 2 students would have shown up on our doorstep and they would have said, hey, I got a little construction experience through what I did in Billings Public Schools. I'm 18. I don't know anyone at your company. He's like, we get a million we get applications all the time that, we just throw to the side because we're like, oh, this isn't going to work out. He said, I got to meet these kids. I got to see them in action. I got to see how committed they are to, a career in construction, or not committed, but interested in a career in construction. I saw some of their abilities. And I'm like, we made an offer to those 2 when we never would have got access to those students in a million years. And then on the student side, it was the same thing. It's like, I didn't know that any of this was available. I knew like heavy equipment interested me, but I had no idea which door to knock on or didn't know anyone. And so that was like, it's like, okay, we're on to something here. Run another program last year. They expand it in Kalispell. So Kalispell runs their first year while we're running our second year. We have 10 kids in it the second year. Goes even better. the kids, we have more kids getting job offers. Basically, anyone who was in that program, all 10 students, if they would have wanted a job offer in construction, I mentioned a few of those earlier. And the big thing is, I guess, to tie this back to the conversation, is the industry came with a, like, hey, we need to do something. The partners involved, they are a lot of them are fierce competitors out in the place of business. Like Tractor and Equipment is a Cat dealership, RDO is a John Deere dealership, and they compete for construction companies to use their equipment to build things. They are partners in this program because they see it as this is about the student experience and about the construction industry. If 10 students, one of them decides to work for Cat, another one might decide to work for RDO, and 2 other ones might decide to work for Cop Construction. It's really about showing them what's available and then playing a numbers game with them and hoping that, hey, one of these students might be interested in what we do after we show them, all that's possible. And so that's, I think, as far as industry goes, that's one that has done something that they weren't comfortable with or they've ever done before. They were willing to work with the younger student. They were willing to work together as competitors. They were looking at what's the greatest good for the greatest all. If we just have more people in the industry,
a give first mentality is definitely, I mean, we've talked about it before. When you go into something going, I'm just here for the betterment, and not in here for what can this do for me, it makes a huge difference on your outcomes.
And so that's the concept, and that's the formula that's worked. And so that's where I say, hey, here's an industry that's not comfortable working with young people, not comfortable working with competitors, that basically said we got to do something differently, and we found a formula and that works. And the one thing I'm really happy, this is the 3rd year, and so now we have 8 students this year. So we went from 10 to 8, which is, we want students that want to be there. We're okay with those numbers. But there's 3 students from Lockwood and 1 from Huntley Project that are participating in the program this year too. And so it's expanding the reach to other schools to have access to, I mean, this program was piloted by Billings Public Schools, but it's not just for Billings Public Schools students. And that's where it's like, hey, everyone around this circle is in it for the students. And the funny part is that all of them that have participated, all the businesses, they've gotten a student now, or that, like someone who's interested. There's one that's working at RDO. There's one that's working at Tractor Equipment. There's 2 that ended up, I think, at COP, and a 3rd one that is maybe still trying to. And then there's 2 that ended up at Knife River. Everyone's seen like, hey, if we take this approach and we're not trying to just like grab kids, say like, hey, work for me. We're just saying like, hey, what are you interested in? They've played the numbers game and they've got some employees out of it. And that's where it's like, it's validated their experience in it. And I think it's a good example for industry to be like, okay, let's break down some traditional ways of thinking about how we do workforce and maybe try something a little bit different. Maybe we're uncomfortable with, and see if there's a different, like, because you can't keep doing the same things, expect different results. That's a prime example of an industry and a company that's trying different things and are starting to get different results. And I think that industry is as positioned as well as anyone to get the next, they're recruiting our students. They're getting students that they haven't gotten before interested in their industry. And so I would ask, every other industries that are maybe listening to this to say like, okay, what are you doing to step up your game to get in the recruiting game like the construction industry is?
And growing new talent that's not like poaching from other people, because I think you see a lot of that in industries where they're, like nurses or dental assistants or heavy machine operators. Like you all have that skill set, but you're just kind of poaching from the current workforce instead of growing new, which is what they're doing.
And then really good thing about that is you're taking students that are, young professionals, and you're able to train them up the way you need them, which is super beneficial. And so that, we push that too is, look at internships, look at bringing in young individuals to come work with you, because then you can train them how you need them, and they're not coming in going, well, this is how I learned it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm definitely, not saying don't bring experience to the table, but there's also a thing, because then they're also bringing innovative ideas into your business that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of yourself. So it again brings it back to the listening to them, and then training them how you need them.
So prime example of that. So there was a student last year in Build, Montana. He applied for the program. He was interested in heavy equipment, but so he didn't really know what he was doing. He was looking at the military. He was maybe interested in construction, didn't have a lot of connections. So he ends up participating in the program. And this particular student, you couldn't squeeze 2 words out of him for the first 2 months. He was so quiet, so shy, was, he was a great student, great participant, everything. But John Hurd says, he's like, I don't know if I heard him talk the first month. And so he gets exposed to all these different opportunities with Bill Montana, and he's 17 by the time he graduates, and he thinks, okay, I still maybe want to be with a construction company, operator side. So he can't get hired with one of those companies until he's 18, which is November. So he's a really young senior. So John at RDO decides, okay, I'll create an opportunity for you at RDO that gets you from now until November, that you get to be in the construction industry. You're in a paid position. You'll work here. And so he started working for John last summer, and he just blossomed. He started seeing all the different areas, and he started off, I think, just as kind of like this role that John made for him, all over. And he was interested in the technology. And so comes November, and he decides, hey, I kind of like the path we're on here at RDO. I thought I wanted to be an operator. I thought I wanted to do this, but like, I kind of like what we're doing now. And so now, as of, late January, he is working with their sales team, which when you think that he didn't talk with two,
equipment sales is hard.
Yeah. He didn't say two words to anyone this first month of the Bill Montana experience. And now he's he's in a sales role, and he's their yard coordinator. So he still gets to operate all the machines. He's kind of the person that knows where everything's at, what inventory they have. He'll go put it on a trailer. So he gets to still like jump in and, do some of the stuff that he was interested in, but it's in a role that's like, oh, we're serving a customer. It's a prime example of like, you can't if you would have grabbed onto that student and tried to make him an operator right away, you would have been doing him a disservice based on where he ended up, because he just needed to kind of see and experience it. And his career went off on a completely different trajectory because of that. And that's like you said, you just can't, you have to grow, you have to think about growing people. And then when their plans change, opening up the doors that they want. And there's a positive example of what you could, you can get if you have that mindset with your employees.
Yeah, it just makes me think, like when you give someone maybe, like you said, a different experience or opportunity, you never know like what that will help them grow into.
Yeah, what they'll latch on to. And yeah.
And John is so great and really involved, which I think he's just a great person to, that we've been talking about, because he is giving first. He is being proactive and trying to help with that, the whole industry of needing more workers in the trades and construction and heavy machinery.
I think John, the catalyst that made John such a big part of this was that he had spent time in education before. And so he was in the trades, but he also spent time on the education side. But the thing that I think has been, again, rewarding part of this work is intrinsically as educators, you get like the satisfaction in your job is like this, it's that. It's like helping students, you're helping them learn English, you're helping them do this, you're helping them, critically think. That's why people get into teaching and why they find it rewarding. What I'm seeing with some of the stuff with business and industry for non-educators is they're getting that same itch that our teachers get scratched while working with these young students. They're feeling that like sense of, hey, I'm helping this kid figure it out, and opening up opportunities to them. And even if it's like they leave my company, they're still like, that's what's best for them. And they're starting to get that satisfaction. And so that's, again, thinking about it a little bit different. You maybe be surprised at how rewarding that can be, even if it ends up where it's like, oh, they only work for us for 2 years or whatever.
2 years you had an employee you didn't have before.
The amount of pride and how proud you are of that person in their journey. I think a lot of our businesses who ended up having students or getting students and then they went on to something else, they still root for them, and they're happy that they got to be a part of that journey. And so that's, I think, something not to discount either, is that they're getting that satisfaction that educators traditionally get in their roles as business people, and it's been awesome to see that.
When you get to help others, it's just nice to see other people succeeding. And even if you were just a little piece of that puzzle of them being successful, it is like a really rewarding feeling. Yes. So this has been such a fun, great conversation with you, Bill. You're doing such great work in Yellowstone County, and we're very thankful to have you in Montana. It's fun to learn about the law school thing. I didn't know that about you, but it's like a fun little tidbit.
And the South Dakota information we learned today.
Yeah, well, East River. If you ever talk to someone, just ask them. East River. Those are the things I miss. I miss East River, West River. I miss hearing someone's from some town, and I probably know someone. We can like do the Kevin Bacon thing where we probably know mutual people. It's one thing I don't have in Montana. When you talk about 2 Dot, I don't have any reference. I don't. Yeah, it's Gobi. I'm like, oh, I've been through there once. I did. So I do.
Now you know the bakers.
Yes,
but
exactly.
I'm working on it, and I don't think I'm moving back to South Dakota ever. So yeah, you guys are stuck with me.
You're truly better off in Billings.
Yes, I am.
So, what's one thing you've been talking about? So many great things that you guys are working on. What's something you're most looking forward to within this next year and a half?
So the Future Ready thing, the initiative, I think I'm really excited about because it's really about getting information to households to be able to make better decisions about all the goals that we have. It's really weeks, months, years of work on this marketing piece that we're finally getting to like show the public and work on and grow, and we'll continue to do. So like we're going to continue to use grant funds to, create even more communication with the household to be able to do that. I'm interested in trying to find other Build Montana type programs and partners. I think it's been a great model. It's not going to look the same in every industry. Some are going to be paid. Some of them are going to be more experiential. Some of them are going to be small. Some of them might be bigger. It depends on the industry, and but I really want to try to take that model that we've been successful with and duplicate that. And then I think just the shift in K-12 education and how we're thinking about careers. I think it's since my time when I started with the apprenticeship program, it's already night and day different about how we think about that. And I think the tide is starting to shift on that college for all mindset into a healthier balance between, okay, college for those who want to go, and then here are all the other awesome opportunities, and really focusing on like, let's just get students to the right opportunities rather than say like, you need to do this to be successful. There's so many different formulas for that. So I think just that shift in tides of like how we think about things is it will really make this work a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot of great things in the queue for you.
Yeah, I'm excited. We always like to end our episode with some quick fire questions.
Okay.
So yeah, you can start sweating now. They're really hard. What's your go-to coffee order?
I am just any type of cold brew, like high caffeine. I don't like, I don't mind having like flavors and stuff, but I drink coffee black. I just love the taste of coffee, which I know people are going to be like, that's a weirdo move, but,
no,
and I do it year round.
Cold brew
year round.
Okay.
I love it.
What's one thing you'd go back and tell your younger self?
What would I tell my younger self? There's a lot of things. I don't regret a lot about my younger self. Like, I think there's a lot of things that I screwed up or did that I was like, oh, I needed to do that to, as a part of my journey. I think being so focused on like grades and those types of things and like not realizing what matters. It's important to be a good student, but it was also like I was so focused on being a good student that I think I didn't learn a lot, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Like my family, we call it like you eat, it's like you eat something, you eat in all the information, and then you just throw it up on the test, and then it's gone.
I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Like it's gone, and it's not like you're not trying to like nourish your body. You're not eating to nourish, where it's like I'm retaining this knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's like literally I'm just doing it to get a good grade on the test, and then it's gone, and I don't learn anything from it. I
totally relate to that.
And so I think that's the biggest thing, and I think that's something our students struggle with a lot too, especially our high achieving students. Is like it's so on the grades. It's not about the learning. And once I realized that, I think I became a lot smarter. You know what I mean? Like
I think you retain
I
things
grew as a
differently.
person. I actually learned things rather than just got good grades.
I love that we're talking about very like revolutionary stuff. Like it's no longer about just grades, and we're talking about revolutionizing workforce. So thank you, Bo. Our last question is, what gets you going in the morning, or how do you start your day?
I don't know if some people are like shower at night people. I'm a shower in the morning person. It's like the shot in the face that I need. I am unable to let my dog out without going into my garage. I have to go through my garage and then let her out the back door that way. And so during the winter months, it is a real like wake up. First thing you do is you walk outside and it's 10 degrees in your garage. It's a good way to get myself going. So I need coffee, shower, a shot like that, and it just really wakes me up. And I am a morning person, so I'm a psycho in that way too. So,
do you take cold showers?
Occasionally, I have recently, especially if I work out in the morning, and I need to like cool my body temperature down, so I'm not like just getting dressed and sweating the rest of the day.
I've been hearing a lot on like it really changes your life if you take a 3-minute cold shower in the morning. So now
the cold tubs. I've seen a million cold tubs.
Can't do that. I do a cold shower.
The polar plunge.
I'm waiting out the results. I'm thinking it's like a fad right now, but I'm also I'm watching attentively to see like, oh, is this something that is gonna like remember float tanks? Remember how everyone was doing the float tanks, and it seems like I don't see a lot about float tanks anymore. So like I don't know if that was like, I'm not saying it wasn't beneficial, but it wasn't something that could last. I'm waiting on the cold tub to see if there's actually like, hey, is this something that's going to be here? Or is this something that people are just like,
it's just a trend.
Yeah, trend.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bo, for joining us on this episode. I've loved our conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Bo.
Thank you for I talked a lot, so I apologize.
No, we hope you get some more hands raised.
Yeah.
And some businesses are willing to take a risky step for a great reward.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
And if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please subscribe and